Okay, so I thought I'd kick off with a nice easy one, which is the diversity question. And Hanneke, when we spoke, you talked about the whole issue of retention of women fund managers, as well as the issue of the paucity of them. So in our data, it's roughly 1 in 9 fund managers frontline managers is a woman. But we find in our data that the turnover of women in asset management groups is higher than it is for men. So why did you want to talk about retention, and what had you got in mind to improve retention?
So the question of retention, I think is important in that it is the thing that must follow the attraction and recruitment of diverse talent, in particular female talent, into the industry, on which there has been a lot of focus on the part of the industry. I think many of us, BNY Mellon included, have done a pretty good job actually attracting the next generation of female talent. Where we are seeing attrition, which is what I think you were just citing earlier on, Lawrence, is sort of in the middle ranks. So I think we must follow through in getting, in ensuring that we get to see an increase in female portfolio managers by making sure that the women that choose to enter investment management also stay in it. I think some of the turnover is probably also attributable to the fact that all of us are fishing in a relatively small pool. So that probably leads to some churn in all of our respective organizations. I think we all know it's a small pot. So I think one is, when we attract them, we must follow through with programs to support them in their career journey. And it's an important focus of ours. I know it's an important focus on the part of the industry. And we must remain committed because it will take time. It's not a problem we're going to solve overnight. But
what specifically are you doing about it? We need some examples of what you're doing to help retention.
So part of it is actually supporting career progression. Looking through parental leave versus maternity leave, and there are different ways in which organizations approach that. But essentially extending maternity leave into parental leave has been a benefit to women in the workplace as well, so that gets reciprocated. And generally, I think giving women access to not only role models, but also to sponsors, be it male or female in the organizations as well, I think is hugely important. So it's built on that. It's the talent program, it is sponsorship, it is mentorship, it is benefits. It's actually a wide range of, or it's a wide-ranging package that has to be put together to keep them in the organization.
Okay, can I hear from one of the men?
I'll jump in, Lawrence.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Ted.
Okay. I was going to jump in. Look, I think that Hanneke has several great points, which we're doing as well. This concept of sponsorship, where actually it goes one beyond mentorship, meaning you're not giving guidance, but you're actually sponsoring a female employee as part of the career progression. You are actually that person's sponsor, making sure that they're brought up in talent reviews, that they're front and center in front of management as you review the talent. That's absolutely critical. We also are spending a lot of time listening to women about the differences. Hey, I'm a white male, not exactly something that qualifies me to understand how women are feeling about the job. So we actually convene a women's group monthly where literally we tackle a range of topics all the way from parental leave to how women react when they're given a stretch assignment versus men. Men say, hey, yeah, of course I can do that. And a woman probably needs convincing, at least according to the people that advise me. So part of it is sensitizing yourself as to how men and women differ in the workplace. And that's absolutely critical. And it's listening to those voices. And then in terms of recruitment, you absolutely just have to essentially go out with an eye towards recruiting. And as Hanneke said, it's a relatively small pond, so you have to start at more junior levels to also build that pond over time. So there's a lot that has to be done, Lawrence. Plenty of work to do, and we're after it. But the biggest point I'd make is we're listening to what the women say to us, as opposed to saying, "Oh, I know what the problem is. I'll go fix it."
I think, Stephen, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just to sort of build on those points, there's three specific things that we've done. Number one, supporting Hanneke's point about parental leave, because it's most often the mum, it's most often the female whose career takes the hit. So we introduced parental leave, and since we did it a year ago, we've now had 55% of those availing themselves have been the men. Secondly, returners programs. So having very specific returners programs that you know that you're going to come back at the same level and be given introductory or reintroductory training to get back into that role. That program's incredibly important. And the one other thing, and this I think really Ted was going here, we've done reverse mentoring. And I've participated in this myself. Actually, City did it. We do it here as well. But reverse mentoring, where you are learning from someone with a completely different lived experience. And when you get that input, you feel this obligation for it to be translated into policy and action. And so those three specific things, and I agree with you, Lawrence, you have to take action, and you got to test and learn, and all of these things. We try, input them, see what happens, see the data, but testing and learning is critical.
But Stephen, can you name one? Jenny, I'm going to bring you in a second, and then Luke. But can you name one thing that you've learned from reverse mentoring that somebody told you that you didn't know before, or which just changed your way of thinking about things?
Yeah, well, one of the things that sort of shocked me. The first reverse mentoring I did was actually in New York City, and I had a young black employee explaining to me what it feels like when you get your car is stopped in Manhattan as a black individual, and it was absolutely incredible for me. I didn't realize when he explained that. I would never take my hands off the steering wheel, and I would be just incredibly, trying to communicate as clearly as possible that I'm not a threat to the officer. And I thought about the experience of, if I've been stopped by a police officer, of course I wouldn't have had any concerns like that. So this thing about it's only we hear the concept of white privilege. And I know many people say, well, I've worked very hard. I'm a white person. I've worked very, very hard. It sounds like you're inferring I had an easy ride. But then you suddenly realize there are just very specific situations where we have a privilege because we're not going to have the implied threat or the tension or the anxiety of having this, this bias against us. So I learned that. And actually, I then got involved in a lot of social situations where I wouldn't previously have been involved, and only through that do you get the change and growth that makes you different. Otherwise we're going to be the same all the time.
Thank you, Jenny.
Well, I was just going to add one thing on the importance of parental leave. Is it changes the message of hey, it's the mom's responsibility to take care of these things. And one of the things that I encourage the men, and by the way, they want to do it, right? Like there's a stigma for a guy to say, hey, I got to leave the office today and take my daughter to the doctor, right? Or I'm going to leave today to go coach my kids. And unless we create an environment where that's okay too, it's always going to fall on the women. And so one of the things is that I say to our management committee, to the male leaders, is actually when you have to do those things, tell people that you're doing it. Like that'll be better for the women if you make that message out there.
Yes.
And that just becomes part of the sort of normal environment.
Yes. Thank you. Luke?
Danny, sorry, Lawrence, can I just say,
Yes.
I so wholeheartedly agree. I'm also going to say that I'm going to declare victory on the day that you or I, Jenny, are going to be sitting in a panel and no one is going to ask us the question, how do we do it all? When we sit on a panel with 3 male peers, we're probably not going to be asked that question. Or actually, when the reverse happens, that they are going to be asked that question, how they do it all.
All right. So, we could talk for an hour on any of these topics. So I'm going to move on now to.
Can I just jump in on diversity quickly?
Oh yes, please. Oh yes, go on, Alex.
One question on this for, I don't know, anyone really. So in the US, where we write largely for fund selectors, gatekeepers, call them what you will. A lot of them have been telling us recently. We did a big round table with a few of them. They have these initiatives whereby they're saying, look, what we're going to do is we're going to try and hold the fund managers with, on our recommended lists and in our models, more accountable for the diversity. And so each year we're going to check on, the managers we use, how diverse those teams are. And, we're going to demand some level of improvement. And obviously it's not a kind of, if they haven't improved dramatically, we're going to fire them. Obviously, that's not going to fly with due diligence. But it's something that they're saying that they're taking into account, and that over time, if they don't see improvements, then it will be a sort of material factor in their decision making. And it sounds lovely, but I'm sort of wondering from your guys' point of view, how that works in practice. If name names like a Merrill Lynch, a Citi, or any of the firms who are saying they're doing this, come to you and say, look, we love these funds, but the teams aren't diverse enough. Can you do anything in practice to actually change that? Is it all quite theoretical? Anyone want to take that on?
Well,
tell me what you can actually.
Probably more for Franklin and Columbia Threadneedle.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a first cut at it. I mean, let's face it, whether you're talking about D&I, whether you're talking about ESG or anything, it's about what's your commitment? Are you honest with yourself? Do you measure what you do, and are you going to be transparent, right? And so I think that the firms that are out there doing it, and oh, by the way, none of us look great on it, right? If you really, we can try to spin it all the ways we want to spin it, but we're not necessarily great yet. But if you're really committed to these things and you're transparent and honest and you measure it, you're going to improve it. And as Hanneke said, it's about every part of the pipeline. It's about where are you recruiting? So, if we're all recruiting from the same ways we've recruited in the past, if you fish in the same pond, you're going to catch the same type of fish, right? So like we're doing programs with historically Black colleges and universities. We're doing internship programs with women so they can see themselves in this industry. So one is, how's the pipeline? Once you bring them in, do they get promoted? How do you have these retention programs in place? And you really have to measure every step of the way. And if you do those things, I think we are going to make change.
And the only thing I'd add, because I think Jenny said that beautifully, is it's the voice of the customer. So quite frankly, the customer basically rules here. And, asset management needs to get even better at listening to the voice of the customer. But if our customers come to us and say, we want more diverse teams, we want better ESG criteria woven into your investment process, we want this, that, or the other thing, we're going to say yes. I mean, the customer is the customer here. And, asset management needs to orient itself better and better to what the customer is telling you they want. And that's absolutely critical here.
Okay, Luke, have you got any comment to make on the diversity question?
Yeah, apologies, my signal's been rather bad, so diversity of Wi-Fi signal is a good thing. The only bit I would add to what I've heard is that there's a process about helping people back into the industry that we've been, as an industry, relatively poor at. That when people take career breaks, and the most obvious source of career break is taking time off for parenthood, the making it easy for people to come back into the industry, getting them into fund management positions again, not saying, oh, well, as you've had 5 years, 10 years, whatever it has been, out of the industry, the only thing you can now be is a sort of client portfolio manager, or a salesperson. And actually, no, you can come back and do fund management. I will say I had a 4-year career break in the middle in this industry, and everybody told me you can't do that because you can't possibly come back. You'll have forgotten everything. Well, it turned out it took about a day to remember how everything went. And it's so I think that bit of helping people back into the industry and helping them come back to actually be portfolio managers is a really good source of increasing the number of senior female portfolio managers we have.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now, and we're going to move on to the broad topic of technology. And when we spoke to you last week, Ted, you said something like operational efficiency was absolutely as important as investment management skill. And operational efficiency you defined as tech, data, and operations. Is that really correct? The operational efficiency? Surely the sine qua non of asset management firms is top quality, value-adding asset management skill.
Well, see, I think the world has evolved, Lawrence, and I would say there are three legs to the stool these days. You start with investment management, investment performance, which we like to say is a necessary but not sufficient condition to make a sale. Then you get to the distribution client service piece of this, i.e., are you listening to the client? Do you serve the client well? Do you distribute well? Do you listen to what they want? But then there's, in my mind, the third leg of the stool. And in my opinion, asset managers have not paid a lot of attention to the third leg of the stool over time. I think they're beginning to now. But that is operational excellence. I wouldn't even just say efficiency. It's efficiency and excellence. And that's everything from client reporting to doing mundane things like cutting NAVs every day. It's also essentially weaning yourself of excessive systems that get in the way of good operational efficiency. And because where tech begins and data ends, and where ops is mixed in all that, we stopped calling it technology. We call it tech ops data because they all fit together. And data, of course, is the new electricity, meaning that we are going to use data in ever more interesting ways to better serve clients. So if you're not good at tech ops data, you're missing one leg of the stool and you're going to fall down.
Okay. Jenny, do you agree with that?
Well, so having run ops and tech for a long time, I used to always joke that, it's like 60% of the industry and the investment sales guys wonder what the heck people do every day. And so I would say to the team, hey, a good day is when nobody's complaining. But remember, when you walk into the room and you flip the light switch on, nobody thinks that utility company did it again. But it's really complicated to get that to you. And so I appreciate hearing Ted say it, because I got to tell you that's one is, as you look at what technology is going to do and what we're going to deliver in the future of this business, and it's going to be, think about these fractional shares. You're going to have separately managed accounts that are going to be, you're going to go away from a lot of these pooled type of assets to more individual accounts at a much smaller account size. Blockchain is going to be very, very significant, I think, in the future. And so it is incredibly important, but it's been incredibly important. It's just been, I think, an underappreciated area.
Okay, Stephen, you say digitization is one of the three things that's going to change the world. I mean, how do you see this evolving?
Well, I think it's changing absolutely everything, and I absolutely subscribe to Bill Gates' view that we frequently overestimate what we'll see in the next 2 years and massively underestimate what we'll see happening in the next 10 years in terms of transformation. So the fourth industrial revolution, what we're seeing with fast, smart devices, fast networks, cloud computing, is really end-to-end integration of tech and data that is allowing us to be genuinely client-led, almost like a nervous system connected to our clients. If you think of it as, perhaps the most audacious way to think of this is you say, why does anybody invest? Well, we defer consumption today because we know we have to consume tomorrow. Or if you're a massive pension firm, you invest today because you have millions of clients who have to consume tomorrow. And when you think about it that way and you say, well, what's happened in industry after industry, everything as a service. So if you think about this as your future, as a service, you start to realize, what is this investment thing that we do? We're actually creating your confidence and trust in your future as a service. Now, Jenny mentions, as we get into using blockchain and fractional shares, and when investment content can flow in the same way as an email can flow, and you've got constant real traceability across the entire system, you can see that if you fast forward to 10 years from now, your future as a service is what we're doing, and is what this business can do, and what this industry can do. Now, there's a lot of gunk in between here and there. Legacy systems, there's very, very deep and heavy legacy systems. There's a lot of bureaucracy associated with it. And we're all working hard to integrate, to get maximum reuse of single systems. And we're trying to streamline our processes. But if you think end to end, from the client's synapses to ours, our investing synapses, what's really going to happen is that we're going to transform this industry into your future as a service. And that's ultimately when smart devices, fast networks, cloud computing is the synthesis of those things. That's the challenge. That's what we're trying to capture in this business.
But what is the client going to have in front of them? How's that going to change what the client is going to have in front of them? I mean, I think asset management should have been a service for decades. Ostensibly, it has been. It just might not have been very good at it. So I want to understand specifically in relation to clients, how's that, and maybe in the way that you communicate with them and the way you sell to them, how's that going to change?
What that's going to mean is that today the most intimate device that we have is the smartphone. It may end up being our glasses. It may end up being an implanted chip. Today, it's a smartphone. Now, we realize this thing's only 11, 12 years old. This advanced computing at the edge, where we've now got this incredible sophistication in our hands, is a relatively recent technology. What this means is that with this device, the most intimate device, you can look at your life today, your income today, your rate of investing today, and you can tell whether you are on track for the future that you desire. Now, the future you desire may be completely different from the future I desire because family circumstance could be different. It could be that the future I desire is to have my children go through university. So being able to use the device to do the financial needs analysis, assess whether you're on track, and inform you of the action that you should take. People like you in this situation are doing X, and then giving you a high degree of confidence as to whether you're on track with your investing future. Really, we're selling confidence in your future. That's what I think this business is doing.
Okay, I'm going to pick up on one or two themes, but I want Luke and Hanneke to have a chance to come in on this subject of technology.
Hanneke, do you want to go first?
You go.
I think, okay, well, if I listen to those answers, I think there's a confusion a lot in this industry about what is for the clients and what's for the shareholders. Look, I think that nobody there talked about technology in terms of generating alpha, generating better performance, generating better solutions, and look, that's where I have essentially the whole firm bet. So I'm clearly a huge believer in that. I think that's for the clients. The bit around operational efficiency is terribly important for the shareholders, right? So if you've got shareholders, most of us on the call do in one form or another, in terms of running the business efficiently, that's about rewards for shareholders. But I think personally, one of the weaknesses in asset management over the years is too many people put shareholders before they put clients. And what's really important, if we're ever going to deliver good solutions to people, you have to put the clients first. So to me, that's the first place where you should maximize your investment in technology.
What sort of things would put the clients in a better position than they are currently, in your mind, Luke?
well, as you know, we do an awful lot of our investing in a purely quant way, which is therefore entirely based on technology. But even where you're doing things in a discretionary way, providing information synthesized for portfolio managers so they spend less time reading reams of stuff or not really listening to conference calls, which is the sort of historic way a portfolio manager or an analyst would spend their time, and letting them focus on the things where humans really have an edge relative to technology.
You told us an interesting story about Reddit. Did you want to repeat it here? How you understood the Wall Street bets?
Happy to. I sort of we've all seen this stuff on the meme stocks. I was first introduced to it fairly early, before any of the stocks have moved very far, by my 26-year-old son who happened to be visiting. And he said, "Have you ever looked at this Wall Street bets thing?" And I'm like, "No." So he showed it to me. And I looked at it and I thought, I really don't understand what any of these comments are about. I couldn't work out what was good and bad. And then it started to move stocks. And once it starts to move stocks, and my own personal view creates some false markets in stocks, it becomes very important. Rather than employing people to read through Wall Street bets with whatever it is, hundreds of thousands of comments a day now, what we did was to put a natural language processing piece of technology onto it, which can both understand the comments and what's good and bad, and also understand the emojis. Turns out, it's important to know whether a rocket pointing up and a rocket pointing down before a diamond means something different. And that produces both an opportunity to invest, but importantly produces a report that every one of the discretionary portfolio managers get, so that they can recognize if one of the stocks that they're interested in is becoming a subject on the Wall Street bets, and they can make a decision whether that provides opportunity or something to avoid. Mostly, I think it's just something to avoid because they're false markets. But the point is you use technology to get it in the hands of a PM.
Okay, Hanneke, technology.
Yeah, much has been said. I think I agree. Technology impacts both operations as well as how we invest, increasingly so. Most of our firms have always focused on investing as an art, but increasingly are using the science and data analytics to support the art. To some extent, to what Luke is saying, while we're not as quant-based, or a number of our firms, we are increasingly using data analytics to inform portfolio construction, risk management, filtering out noise information to come to better decision making and deliver better performance to the clients. I would also say the analytics also help inform our distribution team, right? Where flows are moving with greater accuracy, so we can actually deliver, have better information about clients' appetites and clients' needs. At the end of the day, we're here to help our clients achieve their financial goals. So I think how data and technology is enabling the front end or the manufacturing part of investment management is becoming increasingly important. Clearly, efficiencies in the operating model with the margin pressure that we're all under, we're not ignoring that either, but it's really about where it's adding. You were talking about adding value earlier on, where it's adding value to the client. That's been a core area of focus to us as well, and will continue to be. And I would say finally, COVID, I think, really accelerates the number of these trends, right? We've all ripped up paper. We're all completely now digital with I saw Stephen wave his iPhone. I've got my iPad here. We're no longer having printouts. We might have a little notebook, but if anyone had asked, I think any of us in January 2020, that we were confident that the entire industry, actually the entire financial markets infrastructure, would move successfully online and away from working from the office, I think we might have been 90 or 95% confident, but perhaps not 100%. And we have succeeded, and I think it's remarkable. And I'm hoping that a number of the lessons that we all have learned as part of this process, we can continue to take further to the benefit of our clients and our colleagues.
Thank you, Hanneke. One of the things technology does allow you to do is to have direct communication with the end client. But I think your businesses are primarily sell through intermediaries. But I think there's something very interesting there as to, because you see in China some of these apps like Ping An and people like that, they've leapfrogged the computer and they've gone straight to apps. And I just wonder whether any of you plan anything to use technology to go direct to the client. Maybe we'll start with you, Stephen.
I think maybe I can outline one of the things. I've been here just coming up on a year. And of course, within our business, there are really three vectors of growth. There's the global investor, there's the global asset manager, it's our largest business. And then we have, of course, the intermediary business, which is the advisor platforms. And that's really where half of the UK's independent financial advisors are using our technology in order to be able to provide advice and transact for their clients. And then the third business is the direct-to-consumer business. Now, but even in our global asset management business, we are already using technology to allow our content to flow to the clients of the banks who are, for example, in Hong Kong, Citibank's Citigold clients are selecting our funds on their phone. Likewise in Singapore. So increasingly, what I see is this industry is orchestrating an ecosystem. Now, that's not PowerPoint. That's saying that you've got technology which communicates through APIs into other firms' technology and through to their end clients. And so this is why I talk about this end-to-end flow from client to content. So without a doubt, it's essential that we manage that ecosystem, that we compose our architecture in a way that can happen instantaneously. So I think that the answer is a resolute yes, Lawrence.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come in on this direct-to-consumer side of technology?
Well, I'll make a comment. So remember that TurboTax was going to put every CPA out of business, and the number one users of TurboTax are CPAs, right? Technology allows people who provide advice to be more efficient with it and be better at it, and so I would say the answer is yes, there's a direct-to-consumer component and why that's important. And then two, we see in our high net worth business, we have a company, Fiduciary Trust, where there are a lot of clients that are really sophisticated money managers, and they still want to turn it over because they realize managing money is a part-time job. And if you have money, there's an opportunity cost to doing other things. So I think as people's wealth increases and their priorities about tax efficiency, next generation education, and true kind of estate planning and retirement, they don't mind having somebody who's actually, keeping an eye on it full time. The reason the direct to consumer and the engagement so young is important because that group doesn't have enough money for anybody to be that interested in it, number one. And number two, that if we can just get them in the game, we're all better off. And we're better off in a society standpoint. If you put $5,000 away a year from age 25 to 35, you will have more money than the person who starts at age 35 and puts $5,000 a year away for 30 years. So if we want to solve the societal retirement issue, which is people don't have enough money, part of that is getting people to start investing early and start saving early. And the way to do that is to get them engaged. And it may be through gaming or other things, but there's going to be some amount of direct to consumer that I think we have to do. So
Jenny, because we've got so many topics, I'm going to now segue from you've given me a nice segue into millennials. Okay, Ted says millennials are interested in climate change and the social aspects of responsible investing. Luke says that when I spoke to him last week, he said to me, what did you do when you were a millennial? And I was doing some similar, I wasn't quite doing Bitcoin and stuff, but I was doing traded options. So, maybe, I'm just interested. There's a lot of stuff on intergenerational, how you attract the next generation, both as potential clients, but also as employees, because they might want to go around the corner and work for somebody they think is saving the planet. They don't think you're saving the planet, by the way, although you might be. So what are your challenges for the next generation, and what are you doing about it? Maybe, Ted, you want to have a go? Actually, I came to you first last time. Maybe Luke wants to have a... Luke, you have a go, Luke, because you were a bit sceptical about this next generational stuff.
I mean, I'm inherently skeptical. Look, I think every young generation has things that they're very excited about. There's one of those great philosopher quotes, and I can't remember who the philosopher was, about, if when you're young, you're not a socialist, then you've got no heart. And if when you're old, you're not a capitalist, you've got no brain. That there is a process that goes on always with young people have things that they're very interested in. But I don't think it's, while it's a different tune, it's not very different now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. The things they might be focused on. I think, the reality is the biggest pressure we see on ESG is not from 25-year-olds, it's from 55-year-olds. And by the way, for all of us, the 55-year-olds control more of the assets that we manage than the 25-year-olds. So while I'm all for the people on the call who are encouraging young people to understand about investing rather than just punting around, even punting around, at least teaching them something. But I think this time it's different is a very overused phrase, and I don't think it's that different this time.
Anyone want to disagree with that or take it on at all?
Yeah, I thought I was going to be the most cynical member of the panel, but now I've met Luke. I just want to broaden out the concept a little bit here, Lawrence, because a number of us are in the alternative asset management business. So let me give you an example out of the real estate world. We think millennials are absolutely driving the real estate world. So the fact that they want to live, work, and play in these mixed-use developments that we see in the U.S., it's not necessarily a worldwide phenomenon, but it's certainly something that we're seeing in the U.S. And so catering to that crowd who simply want to be able to walk to where they're going as opposed to taking a car, who want to essentially be able to mix work habits with play habits. And you're seeing a lot of that these days, even among the older generation. I mean, hey, you're bored, open your laptop and answer a few emails, right? And so I think that we're going to have to think about the ways that the aforementioned subject called technology, what the pandemic has brought about in terms of work from home, and the desires and habits of millennials in terms of attracting them to work for you, is they're all embedded in a subject that I don't think we should ignore. So I'm going to politely disagree with Luke on this one. I never say the words "this time it's different" because a lightning bolt usually comes out of the sky and strikes me dead. But I will say that I think there is a shift going on in terms of work habits, living habits, and playing habits that play into our business in a pretty profound way.
Anyone else want to have a go at the millennial subject?
Perhaps
please go ahead, Hanneke.
Perhaps if I can just weigh in briefly, I would separate the two between sort of how we engage with clients, and I think clients are diverse, and we've always had to solve for the needs of the different generations, and those needs can be, have been different across the decades and will continue to be different, but as Luke said, are not actually wildly different. We do need to make sure that the younger generation invests, and we need to make sure we listen to them. But it all comes down to us listening to our clients. So whether it's the 55-year-olds or the 25-year-olds, when it comes to attracting them into our workforce, this is where we do think we have a challenge. They do have, as Ted just alluded to, they think differently about what they're interested in, how they work, where they live, what they want to do, a little bit more shorter term in their time horizon in a sector that is quite long term in its orientation, right? Doesn't always align so well to their goals. I don't think we look to be the most exciting sector to them. But my view is this is where we can play up the technology angle that we talked about earlier, which is going to be increasingly important to asset management, as we just discussed, and tell them that you don't have to join Google to work in technology, but you can join asset management and make an impact.
Okay. Stephen, you were going to go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I certainly agree that if you analyze the marketplace, the money is in the older cohorts, but then we're supposed to be future focused, and we recognize that the largest intergenerational wealth transfer is about to happen. And we know that when it does happen, if we actually analyze the behavior forensically, 2/3 of the recipients of that money change their financial advisors. So to Jenny's point about getting people early and getting connected and letting them understand the nature of investing, I think that's incredibly important. Now, my kids, I hope that this next generation are going to do things very, very differently. I mean, my kids say to me, Dad, we're going to have to fix all the mistakes that your generation made. And I think they're probably right. I think they're absolutely right. I think Greta Thunberg has had an enormous impact. And I think that we've got a whole industry that is really building into ESG and hopefully building back better after a pandemic which has illustrated the complete lack of resilience in systems, companies, and families that the pandemic has exposed. So I do think that we have to just have that openness to what the next generation can bring. Now, if we can facilitate that from what the tools and the technologies and the companies and the resources we have, all the better. But I think we better hope the next generation is going to bring us something.
Alex.
Oh, just really quickly. I mean, I just feel I should come in as the only person who, no offense, but who maybe could qualify as a millennial on this call. I feel I can't let it go. But actually, my question is not really about that. It's a little bit to do with what Hanneke said, which is to do with how you attract people and things and what we've learned from COVID. And I was just wondering, it's a little bit of a tangent, so forgive me, but as we hopefully come out of it in the US and maybe in the UK, I don't know, and things go back to normal, are you all going to let people continue to work flexibly from home? Do you think this time next year, assuming things are okay, you would actually get everyone back in the office and have everyone working 5-day weeks in the office again? Or do you think that's gone now and you're going to allow all your employees to be flexible and work from home, continuously?
Well, Alex, I'm glad that the aging process from staring at a camera for the last 2 years has worked appropriately so that you can now differentiate me from your age group. But I did want to say, I think you're onto something there. And we are interested in something I'd call more hybrid. So we think there are parts of our business, and not surprisingly, the investment piece of it is where people want to be together every day, and we're going to be conducive around an office environment that facilitates that. We also think that there are some jobs that can be done partly from home. We think there's some jobs that can be done fully from home. And we actually liked the geographic aspect of being able to hire somebody who may not necessarily want to be right where you're located, even though we're located in many places. So we're running an interesting experiment in Boston with this, in that we are taking less space, and our model is built around essentially that hybrid concept of some people in the office all the time, some people in the office some of the time, some people in the office not at all, but certainly welcome to come in, with lots of collaborative space where people can sit down and work, and the technology that allows us to do all this all day long, i.e. one click gets you into Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever else. So it's a really good question. I think there's a lot to be learned here, but we're going to see if we can learn from it and try and build some flexibility into our model that will, A, help us attract people, but also facilitate the way people want to work.
Does anyone want to share what they're planning to do? You look like you want to say something, Jenny.
I was just going to say, look, I've been passionate about this using desktop video. We've been using it since it was a separate device because we have over 100 offices, 35 countries. Guess what? It doesn't matter if somebody's in a different office or in their home, they're still on video. And so one of the things that we recognized, when the Tandberg system must have been 18 years ago or something, was that if you were dealing with people in different locations and you had cultural differences and language differences, if you couldn't see their face, you were losing a lot in communication. So we were fortunate in that we had already kind of built an environment where people were using a lot of video. What I would say is anybody who doesn't accept hybrid, and I am amazed by the number of CEOs who are out there making statements about it, this is a war for talent. You're going to lose it because just imagine whatever policy you're going to roll out, sitting there looking at one of your top performers who says, this doesn't work for me. And then what are you going to do? So you're going to find yourself being much more flexible. People have learned with COVID, take New York City or London, the amount of time people commute. They are now spending more time with their family, they're working out, they're spending more time with friends, or they're being more efficient with work. And now you're going to tell them to come into the office. They're going to ask you from a respect standpoint, what are you doing in the office that is adding so much value that I should use up my personal time? So there are times that I think that people need to be together and we're going to have to be efficient about it, but there's going to be a lot more people that I think are going to end up having some percentage. Is 60%, depends on the job. I agree with Ted, where they're going to just say, I'm going to work from wherever I want to work.
Right.
And Alex, I'd just jump in and also add, because I think Jenny's totally right about this. Oh, sorry, Luke.
No,
go ahead.
You finish your point and then Luke comes in.
Okay. Sorry to jump over you, Luke. The other thing I'd just say quickly on this, Alex, is that, the reality is, and I think a lot of us have experienced this, is I'm actually worried about people working too hard because of the last year, the vast majority of people have worked from home. And we have lots of evidence that people are logging on and spending almost entirely too much time on work. And it's cross-generational, by the way. So the thing that we're going to have to manage here is that, we look, the asset management industry hires driven people. It's just people are driven in this business in every walk of and every aspect of the business. We've got to be careful in that hybrid model where people are also carefully delineating between their life outside of work and work.
Okay, thank you. Luke.
Sorry, all I was going to say is, because I completely agree. It's impossible to go back after this last 18 months. So we are in a hybrid world now. But there is a difference between hybrid and work from anywhere in an industry like ours. And it's about regulation. And so one of our challenges, I'm totally relaxed with people being in the office the amount of time that is most productive for them. But when you have somebody says, hey, I'm going to go and work out of Norway, or I'm going to go and work out of Louisiana, you suddenly create regulatory nexuses in countries where we otherwise wouldn't have one. And it's not realistic. If that's, look, it doesn't matter if it's somebody doing a job that doesn't meet the regulatory nexus. But whenever you look at anybody in the fund management process, it's not economic to say, yeah, you can work out of Norway, no problem, because suddenly you've got to go through Norwegian regulatory thing and register and so on and so forth. So I think there's been a bunch of confusion about the difference between flexible working in terms of when you're at home and in the office versus work from anywhere.
Thank you. Angus, you wanted to come in and talk about purpose, which is connected. But I did. I think it also connects with that story you told me you'd heard Jenny and her daughter. Jenny talking about her daughter, yes.
Well, I think purpose connects to a lot of the things that we've talked about so far. The whole discussion around attracting a new generation into the workforce, into your workforces, fixing diversity, and this idea that a new generation wants to, in inverted commas, do good. And Jenny, I saw an interview where you talked about a conversation you'd had with your daughter about whether or not she'd be interested in joining an asset management firm. And
yeah.
I won't recap, please.
Didn't she say she wanted to work for the good guy?
Well, she said she wanted to, I think if I have this right, she wanted to do something that was doing good for the world.
That help. She said, I want to do something that helps people.
So I guess my question is, just to frame the question, I mean, does asset management need to have a clearly defined purpose beyond the things we've already talked about? And if it does need a clearly defined purpose, what is that going to be?
But also, if Jenny's daughter doesn't understand what asset management does, how much chance does anybody of that age?
Thanks, Lawrence. Just show that I'm failing as a mother. But I mean, one of the things that, and I think this is important, I think we're doing a better job as an industry. First of all, if you want to rally people around you, right, have a purpose. And unfortunately, it's easy. And I think sometimes the media, portrays this business as this greedy business that's all about themselves. And, if you want to both attract people to your industry, keep employees, right, it's coming in every day saying, we're the good guys. We're doing things that are helping people achieve the most important things in their lives. Like, unfortunately, it takes money to do good in these things. And so I think we're doing a better job. It's improving, but we can even be better at it, describing what we do every day that is helping our clients meet the most important goals. And to resonate, so, and I always say, well, retirement's an obvious one, but what about if you have a special needs child? Talk to a parent who has a special needs child, and they're so worried about whether they'll have enough money to sustain that child after they're gone, right? And so it's helping describe what we do in such a way that it resonates.
So how do you define your purpose? Well, how do you sorry to interrupt. How does Franklin Templeton define its purpose?
We are here to help people achieve the most important goals in their lives. Now, those are different for people, right? But that's what we do. Listen to your clients and help them achieve those goals.
Anyone else want to say how they... Sorry, Angus, I've taken over
No,
this,
it's fine.
How you Ted, Stephen, Hanneke, Luke, how do you define your purpose? Luke, when I looked at your purpose statement, it was about delivering alpha for clients.
But sorry, Lawrence, just to cut in.
Please.
I think it's also important for us to assess how well we think we're doing that, because that does sound, an eminently, worthwhile purpose, Jenny. But I'm just interested in how well we're doing at communicating that to the people that we want that to resonate with. I think in a way that's the... So
someone else want to come in on this?
I mean, there's two different bits here about how well... sorry, go on, Stephen.
No. Look, you started. Go ahead. I'll come after you.
I think we're at risk of confusing two different things. One is about whether we have a good purpose, which I think as an industry we definitely do, and not every firm in the industry does, but generally we do. It's slightly different from the communication problem, because what you're describing, there is an enormous amount of polling data at the moment about the fact that an awful lot of people in the world don't really understand the point of capitalism and why it's a useful system, and sit there thinking maybe we don't need it. And essentially our job is to deploy capital to the places where it can be most effectively used, and that is absolutely the driver of any of the transformation of the future world that anybody wants. It requires capital. And, so it's sort of, some of the communication thing is that at the moment, the whole basic capitalist system has a problem of communication, and we're a symptom of that.
But before Stephen comes in, you said that some asset management, I think I picked you up saying some asset management groups don't have a good purpose. How would you categorise those, and how would you spot those?
Well, look, I think, that in the end, it's where people are more interested in what's in it for them rather than what's in it for the clients. The only people that take risk in this process that we all do are the end clients. It's the end saver. It's whether that's for retirement or for, the end saver is the person who's got the money to begin with and either gets back more money if we do a good job or gets back less money if we do a bad job. And I have a sort of passionate belief that they should get most of the rewards, and because they're the ones taking all the risk. And look, there are clearly asset management products out there where they have no chance of delivering a thing where the client gets most of the rewards, that most of the rewards will go in fees of one sort or another.
Right. Okay. Stephen, you were going to come in. Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, it really builds on what's being said. Our purpose is enabling better investment. and we know that people need help to do this. We know if you take the UK as an example, the average pensioner in the UK is going to outlive their pension pot by 10 years because we've got health advancement, we've got, the longevity trends indicate there's a gap. Now, that's creating anxiety. That's a terrible thing. Now, if we do our job well and we genuinely enable better investment, we're creating well-being. Now, that's a good thing, but I agree entirely the point that Luke made that the capitalist system hasn't really communicated the benefits of the system properly, and it goes right back to the very rudiments of education. Where we started, Jenny mentioned about if you start early and you start young. So we use this term that we use the power of time, the compounding power of time that works for you in order to achieve your goals. And so I think that we can do better as an industry to demonstrate the real value of better investing, because it delivers people's futures, and I think we can do a better job of communicating it.
Okay. Anyone else want to come in on this? Okay.
Our purpose is to serve the client.
The purpose is to serve the client.
I think it's pure and simple. Our purpose is to serve the client. And serving the client, I agree completely. Our first fundamental job is to do a good job for them investment management-wise, but clients are asking for more than that these days. Teach me about the world. Tell me what's going into your thought process around making your investments. So I think clients are becoming more demanding. They should. Our industry has done rather well for itself over time. And back to one of Luke's points, at the end of the day, it's their money, not ours. It's their money, and we have to serve them well. That's our purpose. Serve the client well.
Serve the client well. Nice.
I think that's, if I may weigh in as well, I think that's well said. Or we would also agree as BNY Mellon, we would say our purpose is to increase the wealth of our clients such that they can meet their financial goals, whichever they may be, as Jenny articulated as well. But increasingly, Ted, it's as you said, it's not just about meeting clients' financial goals. We're increasingly, which probably gets us into the ESG topic.
Yes, thank you, Hanneke. That's where I want to go.
Wanting to see their personal values reflected in their investments as well, and I think that is where increasingly we're going. But we clearly have, and because of some of the comments that Luke just made, which I endorse as well, because of us being allocators of capital, we're also having a way of influencing that future and making sure that those values align. We can vote, we can be active, we can engage with companies, so we can achieve those twin goals. But we do a very poor job as an industry in communicating our purpose. We might do a decent job as individual organizations, but as an industry, I think we've got our work cut out for ourselves.
Okay, thank you, Hanneke. I mean, on the ESG subject, three of the participants in this discussion are CEOs of publicly quoted companies. And therefore, you must be on the receiving end, and maybe all of you are in some way or other, of ESG initiatives that relate to you as quoted entities. And I just wonder, as the receivers, whether you see that the ESG behaviour of the asset management groups to you matches the rhetoric of those groups who proclaim their ESG credentials. Luke.
Well, I know you were going to come to me first, because you know my answer to that is no, I don't think they are. I think one of the things that we see rather sadly from a number of asset managers who are significant shareholders of ours, so own more than 2% of the shares, a complete gap between what they say in public about engagement with companies and what they actually do when you try to engage with them as company management. And I think there's a real problem developing where, whenever I talk to public company CEOs, and they basically, the moment you start talking about what we do, they start ranting about having had somebody from an ESG team come and talk to them about something they should be doing in their firm, where that person has no influence, or essentially that person makes their decisions about how they vote on things, but has nothing to do with the person who's buying their shares or selling their shares. And so suddenly they're sitting there where somebody owns 5% of my shares, but I can't talk to a fund manager who is the person I engage with. It's a completely different area, and the fund manager doesn't care how they're voting on stuff because they're not allowed to influence it. That seems to me people who are not living up to what they say they're going to do.
I think there's a few.
No, I'm not going to give the name of an individual firm.
There's a few things. There's a few things in there, Luke. I mean, the interesting thing is that I think you told me the story of how you wanted to engage with your shareholders about your compensation, but you couldn't get anyone to answer the phone.
We have to. I mean, it's sort of the process in the UK. Every 3 years, you have to put through a new compensation plan for the executive directors. And so we were due to have a new one this year. And it was staggering how many of our top 10 shareholders, never mind top 20, who literally were like, no, haven't got time, not interested, not going to engage with you. And, I know we're not the biggest company in the world or the most exciting, but if you own 5% of somebody's shares, even you own 2% of somebody's shares, you really ought to engage on these things when the company calls to talk about stuff. That's part of the point about, we get votes as a shareholder, you get votes. The point of those votes is in order to engage with management and try to get the right thing happening for a company.
Thank you, Luke. I just wonder if anyone else has had similar or different experiences as running a quoted company. So I guess that's Stephen and Jenny.
I would say that we somewhat different because we certainly have had meaningful engagement. And in the same topic of compensation, executive director compensation, I know that, and before I joined, our board had deeply engaged with our shareholders and then recalibrated for the long term. So they'd made the switch to make sure that there was a larger proportion of compensation that actually was long term. But the point that I was going to make was that we engage very, very deeply with investee companies, up to and including disinvesting, but we tend to do it in a way that is as collaborative as possible. But we do ultimately have the position where we could disinvest, and we have done it. But that creates an obligation for us in terms of the way we run our entire business, in terms of how we run our buildings, up to and including how our employees burn carbon. So we've now, this thing about managing the whole ecosystem, we've actually given apps to our employees so they understand their own carbon footprint, because in fact there is our total impact on the planet is that entire ecosystem. So it's both our partners, our suppliers, our employees. So I do think that walking the talk gives us the credibility to speak from experience to the companies that we're actually investing in for the long term. Okay.
Jenny.
Yeah, I would say that to Stephen's point, I think that the pressure on companies, and whether it's shareholders or the media, to be more transparent around these types of ESG measurements. We just came out with a corporate social responsibility scorecard. It covers the carbon release that we have. It covers our D&I questions, so it covers a lot of different parts. It's putting a stake in the ground. I agree, actually, with Luke's point. Awful lot of asset managers have their proxy voting team outside of the investment team. And that probably works for 85% of them because it's, check the box, and you hope that the investment team on those kind of questions do engage. And I would say I agree with Luke. It's a mixed bag. It depends.
Okay. Hanneke or Ted, do you want to come in on this at all?
The only thing that I just add is we try and incorporate the ESG piece as part of the overall research deliverable. So one of the things that I think that we have to take a look at, and I think the points about proxy teams versus the actual fund managers and analysts is a really good point. But one of the other things that we try and do is just from the get-go incorporate the ESG component into the research overall. Now, as you know, Lawrence, there are varying degrees on what certainly European countries and regulators expect on varying levels. But at a base level, we want to see that ESG component incorporated into the overall buy-sell decision. And we have a proprietary model internally that's highly efficacious in aiding with that incorporation of that research into the overall deliverable. So we come at it, very much on a research basis as much as anything else.
Thank you. Hanneke?
So that is actually very similar for our investment firms, in particular Insight, Newton, and Walter Scott. It's very integrated into their research process, and I hope that that is reflected in the companies that they're engaging with. I also have the lens of being on the executive committee of BNY Mellon, and so we have ESG filters through everything we do because evidently BNY Mellon is listed. So we have worked with our colleagues on the other side to provide that analyst lens, if you will, from investment management to support our colleagues in the CFO office in reviewing the ESG scorecard. Equally, we're also looking at how it impacts sort of client solutions and what clients want. And that doesn't just cut across investment strategies. We have also, for example, supported asset servicing development of an ESG app, which was launched last year with input from some of our investment firms, and which basically pulls data together, which are, of course, so hard to come by, so that clients can customize the information that's out there. Because this is also the challenge with ESG. What are you reporting against? What benchmarks? Do the clients actually understand the benchmarks? How do they compare it to what Ted was just talking about, firms' own proprietary ratings? How does that make them better performed, and what does it mean for their portfolios? So there's a whole, I think, across all of our organizations, I suspect when we talk about ESG, there are just different strands to the conversation. It's how it impacts our own ESG scorecard, right, and our rating. It is how it impacts our values, and then it's how it impacts our client solutions and what we deliver to them, and how that's reflected in the different aspects of the organizations. It's hugely complex. It's probably worth another round table, Lawrence.
We could have one just on that. I have to tell you, we have a division of Citywire which is creates content for asset management groups, and about 70% of the demands on that division are always about ESG, infographics, literature, etc. Angus, you had a question on regionalisation. Do you want to talk about that and why you put it down there?
Yeah.
I want to leave, just to give you a forewarning, I want to leave a little bit of time at the end to ask you all what you want your personal legacies to be. So we'll do regionalisation first.
Yeah. Well, so regionalisation came out of various conversations we've had recently with different groups, where after a long period of time when we were hearing about nothing other than globalisation and everyone was, globalising their business, increasingly we're hearing that a lot of big international organisations are taking a regionalised approach where, we tried to do an event with global heads of distribution, for example, and we sort of stumbled because there really aren't very many. Most organisations have an EMEA head and an Americas head and so on. So I really just would be interested to hear from you, firstly, whether you think this regionalisation is really happening in the asset management business, and if it is, what the implications are for firms that are trying to work internationally and have a global footprint. And maybe that goes to things like ESG, where we see very different attitudes and standards locally. So I don't know if anybody
goes to diversity as well, where if you want to collect the data, you can't collect it in some countries.
Absolutely.
I'd love to come in on this, Angus, because I think these business models are complex, but I'll tell you how we go about it. When we sat down and decided to globalize the firm, about 9 years ago. I told the team that I wanted to be real global, not fake global. And so what I meant by that is I actually want the sharing of information to occur across the globe. And I wanted people to take it seriously as opposed to people who say they do it and don't. And the team took me to heart, and particularly in our investment area, I can look at you entirely straight-faced and say, we are a global investment management firm. We share information seamlessly around the world. We trade around the world. And if anything, quite frankly, the pandemic has made us even more global because we have record attendance at meetings at all hours of the day and night, which is really interesting. Now, that said, that's great for the investment side of the business, but when you're dealing in the world of retail distribution, it's localized. So you have to be regional in that respect. You have to be localized in that respect. And that's why I think you're having trouble finding a global head of distribution in some firms, is because it's tough to have that position exist. That said, in our institutional business, we run it globally. And that's a piece that lends itself to global. And back to Jenny's theme earlier, we run our operations area globally. It is not regional. It is global and functional. So maybe I'm just an old timer who's maybe got to hang up his spurs, but I'm a global guy through and through, and I'm only regional where I need to be.
Well, if Ted's an old timer, what does that make me?
I know exactly how old both of you are, so I'm not going to comment on that. Does anybody else want to come in on that? Different local attitudes around the world and how that affects what you do?
I would just say that we do have a global head of distribution, but I think Ted, look at this central. What should be central, what should be decentralized, is never going to stop, and it depends on the people, and it goes back and forth. But the reality is, from a delivering to customers, and we've all talked about it, with technology enabling more customization, you're going to have to put some of that construction of products and support of the servicing more regional, more local. And so you'll have regional. And then there's some things that are just better served being more centralized. I think that this debate is never going to end.
I think Stephen wanted to come in.
Yeah, I was going to say it certainly is an eternal debate, but we are seeing, of course, we're a global company and we're seeking to get the maximum reuse of things that should be shared. But clients, local context, the increasing regionalization of the world, we are seeing that. Certainly supply chains becoming more regional, the context of Asia and the free trade deals within Asia, for example. So we do have a regional model where we have Asia run as a region, and then we have the Western world run as a region. So I think there's something in it, but it's getting the calibration right of what should be shared and is truly a global capability, and then having the finesse to be able to, for example, distribute locally. That's the balance that we're all trying to strike.
Okay.
We're running out of time, Ron, so if you want to do a roundup.
Yes. I put down here, what do you, as a CEO of a large asset management group, want your legacy to be? Maybe just generally, what would you like your legacy to be?
Nice, easy one to end on.
Yeah, what would you like your legacy to be? What would you like them to say about you? God, Ted, you laughed.
Okay.
What would you like them to say? Ted, complete this sentence. Ted Truscott, he was, or he is?
Well, I will say to this, Lawrence, one of the greatest backhanded compliments ever given to me was, he's the CEO and we can actually take him out to see clients. So we'll start with Ted Truscott. Was a global client guy who loved seeing clients and serving them well. And then the other thing that's very personal to me is that he was a highly accessible CEO, which means he'd talk to anybody, go anywhere to discover what was going on in the organization. And again, one of the best backhanded compliments ever paid to me by a colleague was, Ted, the good news is you're highly accessible, and the bad news is you're highly accessible. So serving the client, being accessible, running the place flat, and getting people to work together and collaborate. That's what it's all about, all in service to the client.
Excellent. What about you, Jenny? Jenny Johnson,
I agree.
Yeah, you've got to have a different
first
one.
Of all, I think, yeah, I will. But I have to say that I agree with Ted. Those are great points. And then I would just say, look, in my 33 years in this business, there's never been change like we're experiencing right now. And, I plan to be here for a while since I'm a new CEO. I want to have adapted to this environment for the betterment of our clients. And that will be much greater customization, really serving the clients to their needs and leveraging technology to do it. And I think we haven't even talked about, I think there's just massive change coming with how our business is delivered and what the investments that we do actually look like.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you're right, there's a lot we haven't covered, but we'll invite you all back again, by the way, for part 2. Okay, Hanneke, your legacy, what would you like it to be?
Yeah, so I'm only 9 months into my new job, so I had to think about this one for a little bit, but it's sort of a continuum of what Ted and Jenny just said. First of all, I'd like actually my team to be my legacy, and I'd like to see a team that is going to be very diverse. We're on a journey with the team, but that the team is reflective of the diverse client base we serve and basically the community that we're in, because that's just going to make us better and is also, I think, going to help us get closer to the clients. Very similar to Ted, I've had feedback that what people enjoy in working with me is that I don't stand on ceremony. I'm also very accessible. And I think that is also really important in our engagement with clients, and that has to be reflected. We just talked about the communication issue that we have as an industry. I would hope that that doesn't exist to the same degree in, well, what shall I say, perhaps a decade from now, because I plan to keep going for some time.
Stephen, you're also a new CEO in relative terms.
I am, yeah. What I would like to be said is that he helped us think about the future and make the best use of technology to get there.
Nice and pithy. He helped us think about the future and use the best use of technology to help us get there. Luke.
Ted, how long have you been in your seat?
How long have I been in my seat?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Depending on how you want to measure it, it's about 12 years. I've had a bunch of different jobs, but 12 years is probably a good answer.
Why'd you ask the question?
I was beginning to worry that, well, I know, but it's sort of, I was beginning to worry that, yes, if I'd been doing it for longer than 12 months, I was past it. From a business legacy point of view, I hope that they say that I built a great culture which survives well after me. That's the thing I put the most effort into in the last 5 years, and I will keep doing in however long I keep doing it. I would say, because you asked the question slightly differently at the beginning, which is when you're gone, how do you want people to remember you?
Yes.
And I got to say, I hope they remember me for doing more good for the world than just working.
Yeah. Good. Okay. I think that's a wrap. Unless Angus, Alex, anything you want to ask before we say goodbye? No?
No, I think it's a nice note to end on. I think in the last 5 minutes, I'm not going to throw any curveballs in there, sour the whole thing.
All right. So I want to say thank you everyone for a really good discussion and a good-natured discussion. And I hope to see you soon and perhaps meet some of you in person at some point. All the best. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
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 Bye.